Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are on the call already, today's session is titled Legal Practitioners Venturing into the International Space. And the idea behind this theme is to focus on the opportunities that you have as a legal practitioner if you choose to work within the international sector. So basically working for international NGOs and international organizations if you are a practicing lawyer or you plan to become a lawyer in the future. We'll be highlighting those opportunities, and we would be focusing on the experiences of our very experienced resource people today. So we have two of them on the call at the moment, and they'll be sharing their experience and telling us how they've been able to navigate and use their skill sets as lawyers within the international space. But before we go into our resource persons discussing their experiences, we'll just quickly give Mrs. Ayabina the floor to introduce HEDDA's Beautiful Hands. They've done a good job again in setting up this session, and we just want to know what HEDDA's Beautiful Hand does, what we're about.
Okay, welcome everyone. HEDDA's Beautiful Hands is a company that runs mentorship sessions, and we mentor home managers, we mentor internally displaced persons, and we also mentor those who want to work with international organizations and diplomatic sectors. So, as we already know, this is called the Career Mentorship Session. In this session, we get people who already worked in various sectors within international organizations who will just share their career growth or how they've grown over the years in their career path. So welcome. Without so much to say, let's just move into it, and over to you, Tobilola Fatilewa.
We'll start off with the first resource person, Mr. Gomiluk Otokwala, who will just do a quick introduction, 2 to 5 minutes, of himself and how his journey has been into his current position. So over to you, Mr. Gomiluk.
Thank you, Toby, and thanks, Hope, for inviting me. Thanks, of course, to Richelieu, who did the introduction. It's good to be here this morning, and I'd like to say, for me, it's a pleasure, of course, to get a chance to speak with Nigerians, especially Nigerian lawyers, right? To talk about the topic of today, in the hope that some of the mistakes people make, they can avoid, and also maybe they can learn one or two things from what Richelieu and I have to say today. Quick background: since this is a Nigerian forum, I'm from Rivers State, right? But then I studied at the University of Nigeria, Enugu campus, UNN, University of Nigeria, Nsukka in full. Did my law degree there. The bio is on the screen for those who can see it. And then proceeded after that to the Nigerian Law School, qualified to become a practicing attorney, a practicing lawyer, as we say, advocate and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. And then I moved over to Lagos, worked with Aluko Anayebode, one of the bigger law firms in Lagos. And I thought that was such a remarkable, I would say, a turning point, in my career. I always wanted to do the kind of practice I did at the firm. But one thing that stood out for me was just the high caliber of professionals we had at the firm. Lots of them had advanced degrees. Lots of them had studied in some of the best schools and returned to not just in Nigeria, but also internationally abroad, right? And had returned to Lagos. So it was only natural that, in that sort of environment, whatever motivations you had, even got fired up. And in my case, I decided it was time to, as quickly as possible, to go out for my master's. I came to the US. Well, I'm in the US now. Did my LLM at Harvard Law, And after the LLM, I tried, of course, to join either the IFC, the World Bank, or the IMF, one of them. It did not materialize at the time. So mind you, I had worked for a law firm in Lagos, right? And I didn't work for too long because I wanted to get my master's out of the way as quickly as possible. And then post LLM, I found an opportunity to work in Washington, DC with a law firm. So I moved here. I'm still in DC. And I was here for a bit. And then I got another opportunity, but this time to go back to Nigeria to work for the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. I eventually moved back to, well, I eventually went to Nigeria because I don't know if it was a permanent move, did the job with the SEC, and it was a great experience. It was the first time I did public sector type work. Gave me an opportunity to practice not just law in the, to the extent you can practice it at the SEC, but also to see how the government actually works. I met teams from the IMF and other organizations. And when I eventually applied again to join the IMF, I felt like I understood the place a little more. And then I came back. I've been here at the IMF for the last 8 years, and it's been a great experience. I'm happy to say one or two words if asked about my experience in general, but I think maybe that's just a good way to summarize from a big picture perspective. And one final note at this point is I speak in my personal capacity, right? Not as a representative of the IMF or representing the views of the fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gomi, for that. Quite an interesting journey up until now. So thank you for that. Just segueing off this a bit for the participants, if there are any questions, you could drop them in the chat. And as soon as we're done with the resource persons introducing themselves, I can start to relay those questions back to our experts today. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Gomi, for that. I'll pass this on to Mr. Lomax, smiling in the picture as well. If you could just give us a brief introduction about yourself as well.
Thank you very much, sir. I want to thank Hope and her team for organizing this and reaching out for us to share with our friends and colleagues in Nigeria and around the world. I love doing this. I love doing this because I love encouraging young people to take steps towards things that you think might be impossible, because it's part of my story. Like Gomeluk, I just want to state that I'm speaking in my personal capacity and not on behalf of the bank. And I'd like to start by saying I consider myself born a Liberian, formed a Nigerian, and my job has made me, I mean, by residence, I'm, I guess, American by residence, and my job has made me a global citizen. So, and none of this happened by some genius plan. I wasn't one of those people who really wanted to be a lawyer, actually. When the time came for us to decide about what I would do in school with my foster parents, who happened to be Nigerian, I said I wanted to be a politician. My foster mom, she laughed, she cracked a laugh and said, look, anybody can be a politician. Why did you try and get a career? And then I was like, okay. She was like, so why don't you study law? And I was like, okay. And that's how I went on to study law. I went to the University of Jos. It was a pleasant experience, a lot of exposure. And after the University of Jos, I was one of those people who were fortunate to finish almost exactly the 5 years you're meant to stay in law school in Nigeria. 5 years, probably 3-4 months, give or take, which is it's a miracle in itself if you have been through the Nigerian public university system with all the strikes and things. And I credit this to our student union government president at the time, who insisted that our riots that we were trying to stage didn't explode into something disastrous that would have closed the school down for 3 years on a plus. So I owe my finishing on time to Julangs. And so we finished from there, and I had a junction to decide what I would do myself. I had a mentor at the time, Dr. Philip Austin, used to be my professor in logic and philosophical thoughts in the University of Jos. And together with him, we ran this online research facility that was sponsored by Carnegie. And he had in mind I would go to the University of Iowa and do a master's in research, because I already started teaching that, so to speak, before I even graduated, teaching students how to use online portals and tools for legal research, and kind of training professors and lecturers how to use those tools as well. And that was the idea. I'll go to Iowa and do a master's and come back and be a research lecturer at the University of Jos. But then I felt a burden to return to Liberia, and I explained to my mentor at the time that, look, I think Nigeria has a lot of human resource. Liberia, we are just barely 3.5 million people, and our human resource deficit is high. So I think I should return home and kind of contribute my quota there. And at the time, Liberia had barely, the ink on Liberia's final peace process had barely dried. I mean, disarmaments were not even completed. And it seemed like a foolhardy and life-threatening thing to do, to pack your bags and head to Liberia. But I did that, and I went back home, and I started working with the law firm of Henry's law firm as an apprentice until I could be called to bar. And I went through the what we call in Liberia the foreign graduates of law admission to bar process, and I was eventually admitted to bar. And I worked in a law firm for barely, I'm not even sure it was up to the full 6 months. Let's say 6 to 8 months. And it dawned on me again that I wasn't meant to be a lawyer, to be frank. And I was like, look, I need to take a break from this. And I decided to work, I worked with an NGO called Merlin as an admin officer. And one good day I saw an ad in the paper for a job with the UN doing justice sector reform. And I decided to just throw in my application. And long story short, I got called for an interview, and I got hired to work with the UN in the justice. It was called the Legal and Judicial System Support Division. Long name. It was we call it LJSSD for short. And its task was essentially assisting the Liberian government rebuild the judicial system in Liberia after the Civil War, which include a range of things from training judges, training magistrates, literally building courts infrastructure, and all of that stuff, monitoring courts, monitoring trials, monitoring the legislature. And it was one of the most fulfilling jobs I could ever have, especially as a young man just starting a career. And at some point in that job, even though it was very fulfilling, I had reached a junction where I wanted to go and do my master's. It was primarily triggered because we reached a point in Liberia where we realized that the supply of lawyers to fill the bench was not completed. We have filled the Supreme Court bench and the Circuit Court. We have a 3-tier system, but the magistrate courts, we could not get sufficient judges to fill the bench. So we thought to seek the law schools to increase the number of lawyers that were being trained, but the law school made an argument that they didn't have sufficient lecturers at the time. So the UN entered an arrangement where staff that had a master's degree could teach in the law school to help increase the faculty. And I thought to myself, hey, let me go and get a master's degree and come back. And one person encouraged me. I was all set to go to Iowa. And one person in my office who I didn't know was a Harvard grad at the time. And he was like, oh, I think you should apply to Harvard. I was like, wow, really? He was like, yeah, I mean, he said in different words, but essentially, I think you have the stuff for it. And I was like, no harm, no foul. I'll apply. Long story short, I applied and I got in, which was a shocker to me as much as it was a shocker to the guy who did the interview at the embassy. For me to come, he was like, Harvard? How did you get in? I was like, I don't know myself. So I mean, you are speaking to the choir here. And eventually, when it was a very exciting experience, it was a very intense program, as commonly would attest to. Essentially, it's a 2-year master's that is crunched into 1 year. I think they are trying to be considerate of those of us who are from cost challenge parts of the world, so that we're not excluded from the experience. Otherwise, it would have been a 2-year master's. And it was an exciting experience. I had no plan of working in the US afterwards. I did not apply to any of the jobs when job application season started. And then it was like 4 months towards the end of our graduation that the World Bank Integrity Vice Presidency came to our campus to do a workshop seminar. And I sat in there, I was like, my mouth was hanging, as we say in this part of the world. Throughout the seminar, I was just shocked that such a job existed. And afterwards, I applied, and myself and 4 others were accepted from our class. And I've worked with the bank for 12 years now. Basically, I started as an investigator. The Integrity Vice Presidency worked in investigating and litigating fraud and corruption in bank projects. And I started as an internal investigator and went on to become, interestingly, my legal profession, which I thought was over because I joined the bank as an investigator, was resurrected by a fellow who became my boss and mentor. I mean, he literally was forming a special litigation team that will help us litigate our case at the World Bank's International Tribunal. It's an international admin tribunal. We call it the Sanctions Board. And yeah, he called me and said, "Hey, want to join my team?" And I was like, "Okay." And I joined his team, and he literally revived my interest in the practice of law, because it was very exciting stuff. It was very cutting edge stuff, and it was a worthwhile experience. And it's been a worthwhile experience since then. I did that, I think, for about 8 of the 12 years I've been with the bank. And then I got an opportunity to lead what we call an investigation team. And that's what I currently do. I've done that for 5 years, leading the East Asia and Pacific investigation team, doing investigation, litigation on bank projects.
Perfect. I think that's a very extensive look at your career path and your journey up until now. So thank you very, very much for that, Mr. Lomax. That's quite interesting. I'm glad that you didn't study political science or something like that. That would have been a waste of your, because I studied political science and it's just a waste of time. You could basically Google your way into all the things I spent 4 years studying. So I'm glad you did law instead of political science. Okay, that's fine. I think I have a question for Mr. Gomiluk first. So yeah, my first question really is, obviously you now work with the IMF. Do you have many sort of lawyers working within the IMF?
Thank you. So we have a legal department in at the IMF, and how many lawyers are there? I would say maybe 70. Wow. That's my understanding. But the IMF, of course, most of the professionals there are PhD economists, right? My understanding, of course, is we have about 3,000 people. So the legal department relatively is small, but we cover the full spectrum of the legal function, advising management, advising the board, advising our member countries, and at least in my own case, also advising the country teams that go there to ensure that we stay within the confines of our mandate, and also basically get the financing and other transactions that need to happen to proceed smoothly. So how much of a traditional role is it for a lawyer to be at the IMF? I would say it is traditional. It's not, you need, as Lomas will tell you, our institutions are products of treaties, right? You know, we are international organizations established by law. So you will almost certainly have a legal department in any international organization, you know, the IMF, World Bank, WTO, all of them. It may not be as large as or in terms of how many lawyers you expect to see, as you might expect to see, say, economists in my office. But yes, we do have
good percentage. Okay, that's really interesting. And would you advise? So I don't know. I'm not sure what the mix is. So within your department, for example, do you have a mix of international colleagues? Is that something that an average Nigerian lawyer who, for example, from your experience, wants to work in the IMF, WTO, whatever international organization, do they stand a very good chance? Or would you say is your educational background and the fact that you were able to sort of get a very fancy degree from Harvard, because not everybody will have the opportunity. So say, for example, I have my degrees all in Nigeria and I'm a lawyer practicing in Nigeria. Do I stand a chance if I apply for an international organization?
Thank you.
Get an international degree first to stand a chance.
Okay. So actually, this is a question I get asked all the time. Do you need to go to Harvard, to Cornell, any of these other big name schools? And I think the answer is no. I say that, and I'm trying to be honest about it here, right? There are people who have. I know someone, for example, who is not a lawyer, an economist, who has all his degrees, including a PhD, from Nigeria, right? And he made it to the IMF, succeeded, and he's temporarily away from the fund at the moment. The reason I would encourage, and I'm not trying to be fancy here, right? I would encourage people to, first of all, you need a master's degree to even be hired as a lawyer in my department. So you need a master's degree. And most Nigerians tend to study in Nigeria, right? After you've studied in Nigeria, some people try to study elsewhere, South Africa, the UK, the US, Canada, and more likely Australia these days. If that's an option that's open to you, I would absolutely encourage, you to try it, because it's not just that the degree maybe sounds more fancy, not just for that reason, but it also exposes you to a different, cultural and academic culture, essentially a cultural setting, an academic environment, and opens your eyes, I guess, to more opportunities. And I also would not deny that there's virtually everywhere some kind of benefit of the doubt given to you if your degree is, high sounding from a certain school or certain schools. So if you can, of course, absolutely do that. But you can be hired if you have a master's degree from a Nigerian university.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure that's encouraging to the participants.
I didn't know that.
Sorry?
No, I said I didn't know that.
Okay. So it's a good thing that you joined. So Mr. Lomax, I think the first question I have for you is, through your journey that you sort of from 2005 up until today, you've fallen in and out of love with law quite a few times. What's the reason for that?
I'm somebody who have always wanted to have an impact, and I've been trying to find a shortest cut to doing that. I mean, everybody, we have a timeline on us, isn't it? From the day you kicked into this world, the clock starts ticking down. So, I mean, you try to make as much bang with the time you have. And at the points where I felt that law wasn't my path was essentially because I felt the road to impact was slower on that track. And especially in the jurisdictions that I attempted to kind of be involved with. It changed when I joined the bank, in the sense that where I work, I have the opportunity to have direct impact on people who come from parts of the world that are facing the struggles of development and trying to meet the development challenge. And I feel that my job of helping to remove corrupt actors as an additional layer that hinders them, it's a direct impact in changing their lives. So, I mean, and it couldn't get better than that, honestly. I always say, as a lawyer, you couldn't do something that is more direct impacting than that. So that's what changed my mindset. And I really love what I do, actually. I think I've been somebody who's been very fortunate to if you want to be honest, kind of being spoiled with my career opportunities I've had. Honestly, I went from a job, my very first real job was working with the UN, and it was very fulfilling. And then I go to the World Bank. I mean, it's something that I feel that has happened because I've desired to make impact in such a way that the path that allows me to do that has attracted itself to me.
Interesting. That's really good. So I think you're pointing out the fact that your mindset has to be right, and then most likely, well, more chances than normal opportunities will fall in line with where your mind is at.